What's up, everyone? Tera Roberts here, and welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tera Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, August 6th, and I am taking your questions live. And we are going to dive right in because we have a super fun show this week. We have a super fun show every week, but this week, I am making the case for late round quarterbacks and talking SuperFlex strategy. I thought it would be fun. I was looking through, and I like talking about training camp. Obviously, we'll do some training camp updates before we dive into that. And I was kind of looking through like all the topics that we've had over the past couple of months here because we are steadily hitting draft season. And I was like, I feel like I haven't specifically talked about quarterbacks enough. Especially a lot of the later guys, because I don't know why. Because it's something that I'm super passionate about this year. And I think I've just been so focused on the top 10 guys that I haven't gotten to go into detail with a couple of exceptions on some of these other guys. So we're going to talk about them. So it's going to be a super fun episode here. Before we dive in, I will do some training camp updates. And there's a few that we need to go through here. We'll start off with my favorite. Keenan Allen has signed with the Chargers. Welcome back home, Keenan Allen. I'm so happy for him. Those of you, myself included, who were drafting Keenan Allen because the value was so crazy and you're like, he's got to land somewhere because he's Keenan Allen. And while he wasn't in top form last year, he was definitely not end of career washed, right? There were some weeks where he was the most valuable fantasy asset in the Chicago receiving corps. So welcome back to the Chargers, Keenan Allen. Obviously, his career has leaned higher in the slot in terms of his percentage of where he's lining up on the field. But you do have to remember that while he is a big slot, he is not exclusively in the slot. He plays plenty on the outside. And so I would expect his usage to vary within the Chargers offense because ironically, that usage, despite the fact that it's a different offense, is literally a duplication of Ladd McConkey, right? If you literally look at the splits and slot and out wide between Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen when he was with the Chargers, it's the same person, right? And we kind of knew that when Ladd was getting drafted. That was the appeal. He's going to be used as Keenan Allen, and we got exactly what we wanted here. But these two can be on the field at the same time. No issues here. We're not drastically raising up Keenan Allen, obviously, because he's an older receiver. And obviously, it says a lot when it takes you a while to land with some money. But while I love a lot of the guys in the Chargers receiving core in terms of the rookies, both Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith, who looked fantastic during the Hall of Fame game. I think we had our last live episode before that game. Yeah, so we didn't get to talk about that. Him showing out was spectacular. So we kind of expected that. That's what we were hoping for, but that was really good to see there. So I do still like those guys. This is not like a, whoa, let's go out and draft the heck out of Keenan Allen, but it's yay good news for us that we're drafting him in best ball and whatnot as our late round picks or holding on in Dynasty. Like, where's this man going? At least we got him going to somewhere where he's back in a happy place and somewhere warm. That's probably critical for him. Other training camp updates. The Broncos depth chart is clearly seniority, people. Please do not lean into that. I've seen some non-sarcastic comments of people saying that RJ Harvey is going to have to work his way up. Man, he's listed behind Tyler Bidet. Yeah, it's not a legitimate. The rookies, Sean Payton, he's just listing the rookies last. It's not an issue. RJ Harvey is still going to be a critical piece of this offense. If anything happens to people buying into this and moving down his ADP, that's awesome for us. That would be wonderful because it is a little hefty. We would like it to be a little bit lower. But we're still team RJ Harvey. Don't read into that. Other interesting news out of Pittsburgh. And I like this one because if you remember last year, I was very much so pro Roman Wilson. I can own my misses on that one. Although it was weird because he was dealing with an injury and it just, the language that Mike Tomlin was using was just that he wasn't getting enough from Wilson in terms of Wilson getting on the field, right? But now he's out there. He's obviously going to be one of the starting receivers. DK Metcalf is the superstar in that offense, going to be the target hog. We love his ADP, but we do wonder who is going to contribute on the sly. Obviously, we have Pat Freiermuth there. We got the addition of Geno Smith. They're running some crazy sets. Obviously, they want to use a lot of tight ends because they have quite a few, more than they need. They're being a little bit greedy there. But the Roman Wilson news coming out of camp is interesting because Aaron Rodgers has been speaking on him, saying that he is very talented. He just needs to get out of his head and stop looking for my approval, which is interesting because I feel like that kind of tracks, like maybe being in his head kind of tracks to maybe what Mike Tomlin was alluding last year. The talent is there. You just got to focus and get mentally right. But we've been seeing a lot of very interesting, good plays from him. I know we got the supposed stare down when there was a route that didn't go right for Wilson, but I like that he's out there getting rapport with Aaron Rodgers because there does have to be a secondary target that steps up in this offense. And Wilson is a guy that is interesting. He is. So we'll just keep our eye on him because the depressed value of his ADP is incredible. It's a late round stab that could pay off potentially. Nick Chubb did not practice today. Dameon Pierce, who was recently cleared to play, got the first team reps. I would probably attribute that more to them trying to get him up to speed. Not that that's all of a sudden like Dameon Pierce to the moon, but it's good to see him get out there and get to work with the first team. More interesting news, because that's kind of like, news. More interesting news for running backs. James Conner and Trey Benson. From what Conner is saying, from what we're hearing, from what beat reporters are saying, man, this looks like it's going to be a split backfield. And that's critical because we talked last week about my perspective on running back tiers. And I talked about the fact that there's this little tier that is basically like RB 17 through 20. That's like a mini tier that happens before you get like 1 through 16, which basically ends, depending on what ADP you're using, basically ends with Alvin Kamara and or Kenneth Walker. And then sometimes Amari and Hampton has been slipping up in there, just depending on how people feel, right? But for the most part, that tier kind of cuts off at Alvin Kamara and Kenneth Walker, right? And that's the main tier where we feel super comfortable. These are RB1s. They have high upside, and they got the capabilities to go out there and be top 5 backs. That's a whole giant tier that we feel comfortable with. And then there's this little mini tier before we hit a nasty cliff, right? And the tier is like 17 to 20, and it starts with Amari and Hampton, and it ends with David Montgomery. And then it falls off into this area of guys that we ultimately should not trust, right? And James Conner is in that little mini tier of guys that we were trusting to be that secondary, like, okay, if I got a grab from this tier, I'm not super happy about it, but I'll take it, right? It's okay. And if he's going to be out there splitting reps with Trey Benson, which is interesting because I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before that Trey, if not, I'm sorry. Trey Benson has been one of my favorite handcuffs to grab just because of James Conner's age. Injury history is not a big issue with him. It's usually like he never has just like this blowout season ending massive issue. It's like a weird, like, okay, 2 to 4 week period that just kind of happens for him. But when you look at him, the age, the fact that, we can see just like a tiny bit, not major, but just like a tiny little bit of regression coming in. It did make me wonder if this was the year where we were going to see him transition out of that role or have some kind of injury or something that would push Benson up into a RB1 potential league winning type of role. And for us to already be getting this, they're going to split carries, and James Conner saying we're both lead backs, like, oh, red flag for James Conner. We need to pay attention to it. When running backs are verbally stating this is not speculation. This is straight words from the team. We need to pay attention to it. And they are a team that is very balanced. Perhaps a little, I don't want to say run heavy, but they are a very balanced team. They were not last year putting an aggressive amount of volume on Kyler Murray, which was weird because he had an overall efficient and fine year. They just weren't letting him throw the ball that much and leaning more on the ground game. Maybe this addition of Trey Benson kind of leans more into that they're just going to continue to lean on the ground game. It's interesting. It's something that we need to pay attention to there and get mildly concerned about. I'm going to dip to the comments. Jerry Nelson here commenting kind of like Benson this year. Yeah, I think we should lean into it. Look, we got to remember that we did love him as a prospect. We did. Obviously a big guy, early down back. He's not incapable of pass catching, so he can have a 3-down role. Last year, sometimes you get these rookies that come in to be the backup, and that's what he did. He came in to be the running back in waiting, and you have higher expectations than you should. Maybe we were pushing him, or not we, that wasn't me, but maybe there were some people that were kind of pushing him into a lead back role before it was truly his time. So it feels like this might be his moment to really get to shine. And it's very interesting. It does make me more wary of James Conner, which in turn, again, I told you, I lean more robust RB this year. I don't like it in my spirit, but when I look at the running backs that are happening after 20, my spirit tells me red flags, avoid. Grab your running backs early because there's plenty of value at wide receiver. There's late quarterbacks. We don't have to grab a quarterback early. If you can't grab one of the elite tight ends, that's fine. We'll make it work and draft a tight end later, a Tucker Kraft and whatnot. Even deeper, we got options there. But really, this James Conner news and Trey Benson makes me again feel super good about him as one of those high-end handcuffs that I need to target, right? We need to get him because the ADP is excellent. You're drafting him to be on your bench, and this could be a situation where he pushes his way into a lead back role, or at the very least, someone who can provide us a good 10 fantasy points on bye week and whatnot. We need a flex fill in. Maybe he can give that to us with some upside if this offense goes in a better direction. And side note, Arizona has been dealing with some key injuries on defense. Their defense towards the back half of the season was really coming around. So you kind of wonder if maybe they take maybe a slight step back with the injuries that they've been dealing with and have to push more offensive volume. So just something to pay attention to. But again, makes me red flag Conner and want to grab my running backs before that. Grab them and just not deal with the stress of it. I can make it work with a wide receiver. Again, like I was saying, like a DK Metcalf, there's so many options for a wide receiver too that are perfectly fine. One more piece of news out of training camp. The Bears backfield is getting weird. Swift, they're saying, is the lead back. Kyle Monangai is operating as the RB2, change of pace back. But Roshan Johnson is getting goal line carries. Again, DeAndre Swift comes right after that little cutoff of I said that mini tear there. I getting uncomfortable. I don't want any piece of it. I'm taking the guys with the lower ADPs, and Kyle Monangai is looking pretty good to me. So just take a note on that one. But let's go ahead and dive into the meat of the show here, the quarterbacks that I wanted to talk about. And we've got to talk about one, the value that we are getting with late round quarterbacks, how to approach it in SuperFlex. And I'm very excited to talk about that SuperFlex strategy after we hear a word from our sponsors. And I'll be right back after this.
If you play in Dynasty, you need Dynasty Deluxe, our premium package for Dynasty Leaguers. We rank over 300 players, updated every week, all year long. And there's a win now mode and a rebuild mode with SuperFlex and tight end premium controls. And a Dynasty League sync where you can say, sync down all of my sleeper teams, all my FFPC teams, and then you can browse around your leagues for who has needs, and then you can use our trade finder to see what kinds of trades are happening in leagues that are similar to the one I want to do. Then you can analyze trades using our trade analyzer, which balances the lifetime value, which includes pick values out to like 2028. All of that plus the rookie guide $25 value is included. So if you're just in one Dynasty League, Dynasty Deluxe is well worth it. And use your host's promo code, and you can bump up to all in and get $25 off.
And your host promo code is just Tera, me. Tera, Tera, if you want to get a discount on that amazing package. And we need it because, again, we've got some weird things going on with players. So look into that for real. Before I move into SuperFlex, which is awesome because I see some comments that we've never done SuperFlex, so maybe we'll convert some people. I'm making it my goal to do some conversion of people to stuff this year. Particularly DFS. There's a lot of people that I feel like are just missing out here. I'm going to convert people to DFS this year. I'm doing it. Y'all are coming along with me for the ride because that's one of my super passions in this world, and I never get to talk about it. So I'm just going to force the audience to come along with me, and you're going to enjoy it, and I'm going to explain to you why you're going to enjoy it. So maybe we can do the same with SuperFlex here and convince people to play SuperFlex because it's super fun. Right? It makes every single quarterback matter. Before I go into that, I did have a comment here from Daryl regarding Keenan Allen. What does Keenan Allen back to LA need for Ladd or Trey Harris? With that one, I'm not downgrading either one of them. First of all, not downgrading Trey Harris because his ADP hasn't risen significantly enough for me to say we got to push him back a little bit. And not Ladd either. I kind of see Keenan Allen being that safety blanket in terms of them feeling like as they're bringing along these rookies, they can lean on Keenan Allen, one, for veteran support in terms of developing these guys, and two, to fill in roles where they just need somebody that's more reliable. Obviously, Ladd and Keenan Allen's roles bump up like immediately, the same exact thing. But I would expect probably to see Ladd function exactly as he was last year, since that's the youth, that's their future, and he's been very successful at it. And I probably expect us to see Keenan Allen out wide a little bit more than we traditionally did see. All right, SuperFlex strategy. Let's go. Doubling up on quarterbacks this year early. It's never a bad thing, but this year I genuinely do feel like we have workable depth at quarterback. So for me, if I have a pick where I am able to obviously grab one of those elite tier guys, and for me, when I talked about the elite tier, for me, that is strictly 1 through 4 of Josh Allen, Lamar, Jalen, and there's so many J's, Jesus. And then pushing Joe Burrow to kind of be adjacent to them. He's not in that tier. You don't have the legs to be in that tier, Joe, but you got the volume to be considered right along with them. So I trust him. He's put up enough top 5 seasons when he's healthy for us to say, look, this man's a high volume quarterback. This is how they operate. If he's on the field, he's a top 5 guy. Feeling super comfortable about that. So those are the guys. If I'm in a position to be able to get those guys, then I grab one of them and then I wait for my late tier guys. But obviously that if you're doing a snake draft and not an auction, you're at the hands, your hands are kind of tied in terms of your ability to grab from that tier. So you're faced with the big question, do I grab one of these elite options at another position? Do I bypass that tier 2, which is kind of like that Patrick Mahomes to Bo Nix kind of range? What about the early tier 3 guys? Are your tier 3 guys actually worth it? That starts with like the Brock Purdy-ish kind of, the Brock Purdy-ish kind of area. Do you lean into that? Or do you wait and then grab a mid-tier QB2 or even a later range guy? Personally, for me, I am waiting this year. I'm okay with it. I've talked about position scarcity at running back earlier in the show and kind of like at exhaust. So it should come no surprise to you guys that I'm very much so a proponent of, if you can grab one of those elite quarterbacks, you have to do it. You know, that's not an option to bypass that. But if you miss out on Joe Burrow and you're going after that, you need to prioritize getting one of the elite tier at running back, wide receiver, or tight end if you're able to. Tight end is obviously my lower priority there, but grabbing from elite, from running back or wide receiver, bypassing and then pushing to these lower tier QB2s, I think it's the better strategy this year. Now, when we're looking at these lower tier and I should actually, let me pull up, I'm going to pull up the Fantasy Pros ECR rankings just so we can get a general consensus and not biased here. So the gap where they separate off really appears to be, and I think this is going to fluctuate. People are still kind of holding on to Caleb Williams because of that, the upside that he showed last year. He does have the running ability and whatnot, so he can get pretty high in terms of the actual ceiling that he has. But from what we've seen in training camp, things have been a little bit shaky for him. So for me personally, he falls more into this area than one of those earlier guys that in tier 3 that I'm trusting. I would not categorize him with a Dak Prescott or a Justin Herbert or Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray. Those are not things that I would lean into. Even Bo Nix is kind of one of those borderline guys that's between tier 2 and tier 3. I don't think those are remotely the same guys. So I kind of push him out there. Now, when we're looking at these guys, these mid-tier to lower end QB2s, it starts off with guys like Jared Goff, who I think is more trustworthy and deserving of going earlier than a Drake Maye, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, JJ McCarthy, Tua Tagovailoa, Matt Stafford, Bryce Young, Michael Penix. That rounds out the QB2s. That's how deep it is. When we're talking about a guy like Michael Penix being ranked in Fantasy Pros ECR as literally QB 24. After that, you've got Geno, still viable, Sam Darnold, Cam Ward, Aaron Rodgers, Anthony Richardson, Russ, and then, things get a little bit shaky there. But this is a very, very interesting range here. I'm going to dip back to the comments here because we're getting a lot of quarterbacks here. Agree that tight end is the lower priority here from Only Morale. Yeah, if you're picking and choosing, you're grabbing your elite quarterback there, and we're prioritizing. And I like Brock Bowers, obviously, and Trey McBride. But when you're looking at the positional difference and the difference in fantasy points, if you got to push one off to the side a little bit, that's the one that you have to. Let's see there. We've also got, did I talk about Justin Fields and Caleb Williams? I did not talk about Justin Fields. And I've been very pro Justin Fields. But you have to, we can't ignore the fact that the training camp feedback has been very mixed. I did a little joke video on TikTok today about the positivity that we get from beat reporters and the fact that the only real reporter, not only real reporters, let me not insult, the real nitty gritty, like we're being blunt, reporting is coming out of Chicago. Their beat reporters are they're giving it. They're like, hey, look, this is what it is. Here's the struggles. Here's this, and that. They're not sugarcoating things for us. But I would also say that the Jets, the New York beat reporters, are not sugarcoating things as well. They're very transparent about Justin Fields. The offensive line occasionally struggling, and that's to be expected because you have to remember the offensive line is rebuilding. I think that New York did an excellent job of rebuilding that offensive line, but that is something that is going to take a little bit of time as the season goes on. So things are a little shaky right now. But we are hearing good news about the connection between him and Garrett Wilson. Again, we do have to be a little bit cautious here. So Justin Fields, because of his rushing upside, he is still falling into literally right at that low end QB1. Because of the rushing upside, it does make sense here. Also, because of the fact that he does not have a job security issue, there's not really a person on the Jets roster that is looking over his shoulder. There's not been someone who has just been in there kind of. It's not a what's a good comparable situation. I mean, it's clearly not a Indianapolis situation, a Cleveland. It's a very secure job there in terms of his role this year specifically. So we don't have to worry about him being removed as the starting quarterback at any time here. So personally right there, Justin Fields, I think he is appropriately priced as a low-end QB1. If it is risky with guys like Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert going behind him, if you're looking for a safer option, it would definitely be to bypass Justin Fields. Caleb Williams for me, again, I'm not super comfortable with that one based off the feedback that we are getting out of training camp. We do have to remember with Caleb Williams, the expectations are super high in the long term because of Ben Johnson, but this is a new offense that he is learning. And he is having to unlearn all the things that he had last year. And he is having to grow in trust with his offensive line. And his offensive line is also having to grow in chemistry as well. The offensive line has not been perfect out there for him. They put a lot of money into it in terms of free agency investments. But at the end of the day, there still has to be development and gelling that has to happen there. So just that's how I feel about Caleb Williams there. A little bit worried about him. Not a bad cost for the ADP though. But when we look at these guys, and I'm going to start us off at Drake Maye, because I don't think it's fair to talk about Jared Goff as a mid-tier, low-end QB2 when the man has just, been gelling. I understand the skepticism of Ben Johnson being gone, but I don't consider Jared Goff to be in that same tier. He's higher for me. So I am starting things off personally where I start talking about these late round quarterback targets at Drake Maye. And I'm going to talk about guys that I like first, and then guys that I don't like from this range. Drake Maye is a guy that I love as a QB2 late round target. And again, somebody who in SuperFlex, like for me in Dynasty, I've got him on 2 teams. And from a SuperFlex perspective, and both of those leagues are SuperFlex, but from a SuperFlex perspective, I love the security of being able to have 2 quarterbacks that have legitimate top 5 upside because of their rushing ability. Training camp has come with some ups and downs for Drake Maye. We do have to remember that, again, similar to Caleb Williams, Drake Maye is learning a new system. But this is a new system that is very well known. Josh McDaniels, very well known to be difficult to pick up. We heard about it with Derek Carr, obviously a very seasoned veteran way back when, just really struggled to pick up the system. It's not easy, right? So we're not expecting perfection out of training camp and preseason from Drake Maye. We're expecting some kind of visual promise, and I think we've gotten that. We want to see upside, right? We want to see connection with these receiving weapons here. Drake Maye's numbers from last season look underwhelming because there were multiple games where he played less than 50% of snaps because, 1, he was coming in at weird times. 2, he dealt with a couple of injury issues. So there are several games in there that he played less than 50% of snaps. So when you eliminate those games and you look at weeks where he played basically the entire game, Drake Maye never finished below QB 17. And that is where he is being drafted as. That he never finished below that. So to be clear, the average was well above that. That was the floor. He is being drafted at his floor right now. That is wildly impressive considering that the Patriots had one of the league's worst offensive lines last year, incredibly limited weapons. And now we turn to OTAs, and his receiving core during OTAs and now in training camp has been looking massively upgraded. Stephon Diggs, say what you want, but he is fully recovered. Hey, which is impressive at his age because this is often the kiss of death. But the man is out there at 100%. He's good to go before training camp. And that is not the case for every other older receiver that has been dealing with an injury that ended their season last year. Kyle Williams is shining. Travion Henderson. The feedback from Travion Henderson, again, we get glowing information from beat reporters in general because they super excited about a lot of these new guys. But the feedback from Travion Henderson has been fantastic, both on the ground and as a receiving option. He should be an integral piece. And then we've got the incumbent players doing very well as well. Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte doing well. This is not a perfect situation, but in terms of guys that I am targeting, once we get past that QB1 range that is mildly acceptable. You got like a Kyler Murray, Bo Nix, and whatnot. I like to jump to a Drake Maye right there because realistically, the upside is just so incredibly high from him. I do anticipate that he would still have some of that rushing upside as well. I know it's a new offense, but we should still get that as well. So that is one that I'm loving. I do want to talk about Jordan Love as well. Last year, not the best for him. You guys know that I'm a Packers fan. Obviously, I won't front that I love Jordan Love. I got love for him. Packers fans, we affectionately call him Pookie, thanks to his wonderful wife, fiance, Veronica. And he will have a bounce back season here. I'm feeling positive about it. Everyone always says that we are looking for those year 2 regression candidates. And technically speaking, I think we kind of bypassed the fact that last year was year 2. and it was literally just a year 2 regression for Jordan Love. There weren't any major issues. There was a combination of small dips in production that just kind of added up to a pretty significant dip in overall fantasy production. Jordan Love went from QB7 in 2023, averaging 19.4 fantasy points per game, to QB18, averaging 16.3 fantasy points per game. But technically speaking, there are two quarterbacks that played one game and did very well in those one games. And so they kind of mess up that average there. Technically speaking, it was more so QB 16 of guys that started multiple games. But regardless, that was a dramatic dip. Again, it was a bunch of little things. He had a higher interception rate, less rush attempts. That was no good, which meant less rushing touchdowns, less yards per game, lower on target percentage, and a higher drop rate from the receivers. Not good, but that is why they drafted Matthew Golden. They saw an issue and they saw a player that fit exactly what they needed. But again, none of those were dramatic dips. It was just a little bit here and there, and then it all added up here. I mentioned Matthew Golden here because I do think that that is the key. We've gotten a lot of positive news out of him, and Jordan Love has spoken on it specifically. And the thing that is consistently said is the major thing that I saw in Matthew Golden that I feel is just exactly what the Packers needed. They needed somebody who could be reliable in terms of running crisp routes and hands. They had to have somebody that had good hands. They had a major issue with a lot of those guys who were very speedy guys, very speedy outside guys, very talented, but just could not hold on the ball. Dontavian Wicks, we're looking at you. Inconsistencies from Christian Watson as well. Matthew Golden is a guy that can bring consistency to Jordan Love, and it raises that ceiling for him to get back on track here. So look at last year. It was more of a second-year regression for a guy that was a second-year starter. And heading into this year, we've got a lot more consistency from the Packers offense. We've got the addition of Matthew Golden here, and we should be able to see this kind of elevate his game overall as well. Another quarterback, another QB2 that I am okay with targeting. This one might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it is Trevor Lawrence here. Every year, we hope that Trevor Lawrence finally breaks out. And it's weird to say breakout because technically speaking, he does still need to break out. We've had spurts of amazingness, but we've never had consistency throughout an entire season, right? We've seen miraculous come from behind, 4 or 5, I can't remember how many, 4 or 5 touchdowns in a second half to come back and win a playoff game. We know that greatness can theoretically be there, but it's been a rough go for him. Obviously, starting off with Urban Meyer doesn't help anybody. Doug Peterson brought a little bit there, but still at the end of the day, the offensive system was just not giving what it needed to give. And the Jags being able to snag Liam Cohen was just a massive win for them overall. Also GM as well. But when we're looking at what Liam Cohen is bringing to the table, this is such a QB friendly system. When we look at things that offshoot from Sean McVay, I've talked about it a lot in the past. Actually, I talked about it in terms of why I like JJ McCarthy, who is also on this list clearly. But those offenses that come from Sean McVay, they just tend to take quarterbacks back to an ease of offense that allows them to tap into the talent that they originally had and thrive. Your Baker Mayfield, your Sam Darnold with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. So these are systems that are able to fix the little wayward quarterback. So if there is a right time for Trevor Lawrence, it is this time. If it doesn't happen this year, it ain't gonna happen. But when we look at it, he really is being placed into a perfect position. And that is key here because we're not going to lie. His production has gone down every single year since his only QB1 finish back in 2022. But we are finally getting a really nice ADP discount on him. That's been an issue in the past is that because we wanted to believe so much in him, we've been drafting him slightly as a early QB2. It's been overshooting a little bit. And now we're getting this late QB2 discount on him. It's very nice here. He has the talent to succeed in the right system with Brian Thomas and the addition of Travis Hunter here. This could actually be what pushes him to success. And because it is Liam Cohen at head coach, I do feel more inclined to give it one more try with Trevor Lawrence and feel comfortable with him as my QB2 that we're grabbing in later rounds. JJ McCarthy, I've talked about as well. I'm not going to dive into it a ton because that was a big one that I talked about last week in particular, I think, or maybe the week before there. But McCarthy, again, as I was saying, perfect system for a first-year starter, arguably the best group of receiving weapons in the league. I mean, you're looking at Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison for not the first 3 games, but Jordan Addison after that, TJ Hawkinson as well. By the way, that's something that actually does makes TJ Hawkinson a little bit more interesting because when I'm looking at tight ends, sorry, random offshoot there that was we're gonna have like a mild ADD off track here. When I think about tight ends, I always talk about obviously the big 3, George Kittle being my favorite of that 3 because you get like a round and a half discount from the first guys in Brock Bowers and Trey McBride down to George Kittle, who has the same exact upside as those 2 with a nice little discount there. Could be the first look in that offense. And after that, that's really my cutoff of, okay, guys, we're just going to wait, and we're going to wait for Tucker Kraft. We're going to wait for Tyler Warren, who I do, in fact, like, regardless of who is at quarterback there. We're going to wait even more, and we're going to dip further back here because there are viable options even later. We can take a streaming approach and say we're going to stream a Chig, we're going to stream a Mason Taylor, and we're going to stream an Elijah Roy. We can go like 10,000 directions. Britton Strange. There's routes that we can go. But of the guys that are kind of in that middle area, TJ Hawkinson is the one that does actually intrigue me a lot. I don't like that he is clearly the third look in that offense, but what I do like is the fact that, one, you have a first-year quarterback, perhaps a little bit more safety blanket passes to a tight end. 2, we are getting that little nice 3-game bump there from Jordan Addison being out. And then 3, we do have to remember that TJ Hawkinson came in cold last year. I don't like to draft. I don't like leaning on anybody that is coming in cold, missing the first, what was it? I mean, it might've been like 6 games or something. I can't remember, but it was kind of like mid-season that he came in. And came back to good action, right? But usually when you're coming in mid-season like that, you haven't had the proper off season to really get up to game speed there. So you won't be yourself, right? So we have to kind of give him a little bit of a mea culpa, and we'll probably see him get back to the TJ Hawkinson that he was before. So I do like TJ Hawkinson a little bit because of the potential for volume that he has. At least he has volume potential and doesn't have to be touchdown dependent just because of the structure of the offense there, even if he is playing with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. But back to JJ McCarthy. Again, that is he's got just this unbelievable depth group. That does not even include from a pass catching perspective. Aaron Jones. Wait, one more side note there. Please do pay attention to the fact that we are getting an extreme amount of confirmation that Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason are splitting carries. Do not be delusional about that. I cannot stress this enough. I talked about it. I mean, my God, it might have been 1 or 2 months ago. It was one of our earlier episodes in this off season. And I do want to reiterate that because I mentioned that before it was actually like a thing. And now you need to accept it as a thing. It is going to be a split backfield. We're going to be seeing short yardage stuff from Jordan Mason. We're going to be seeing goal line touches from Jordan Mason. Please pay attention to that. When you are looking at Aaron Jones, realize that the workload that he had last year is not going to be the workload that he has this year. That ties back exactly to what I was saying about those running back tiers, because Aaron Jones is after that little mild safe tier that happens right before or right at RB20 and before. So RB21 and back, we're a little bit scared of that. You can take it, you can hit it, but just be aware that that is the sketchy range of guys who will be splitting carries or not have super solidified 100% roles. Now, moving on to my next quarterback there. This one will surprise you guys because if you have followed me over the years, I have consistently, going to take a small drink break there. I don't know why I just drank something fizzy. I had dinner before I started the show. Usually, side note, usually, guys, I wait to have dinner after. But I cooked steak for dinner, and you cannot wait. Like, you can't cook steak and then say, okay, I'm going to come back and eat 2 hours later. So I ate right before this and apparently drank lots of fizzy drinks. And now my throat is very dry, but we will push forward through this. If you guys have followed me in the past, you guys know that I am very skeptical of drafting Tua as a quarterback. I've never been afraid of his weapons. I'm super pro Devon Achane. I'm very pro Tyreek Hill this year, even though he's been in the in the media acting a fool. Very pro Jalen Waddle bounce back here. Yeah, I've even talked myself into late round stabs at Darren Waller in tight end premium leagues, just because, right? But this year, my little anti-Tua stance has turned into a pro-Tua stance. Don't judge me. And there's a valid reason for me turning pro-Tua this year. My problem with Tua hasn't been the fact that, and I obviously do prefer, it's very clear, I prefer quarterbacks with rushing upside. I'm not a big fan of pocket passers, right? Just because there's so much that can go wrong. Looking at CJ Stroud, offensive line, there's just things that can go wrong, and you can't bail out of it in terms of fantasy production. But my issue with him is not that he's a pocket passer, because the volume has been there for him, that it shouldn't be a major issue. My problem with Tua is that there is a very clear and visible wall that he hits every single year like clockwork, and it makes him wildly unusable at the end of the fantasy season. I wanted to get very specific with you guys and look at weeks 14 through 17 for Tua over the past 3 years. 2004, weeks 14 through 17, he was QB 25 over that time period, tied with Cooper Rush. Marinate on that. QB 23, or I'm sorry, 2023, he was QB 24, tied with Aiden O'Connell. 2022, he was QB 19, right behind Ryan Tannehill. This paints a very, very clear picture for him. He dies at the end of fantasy seasons, and it is literally because he does not perform well in cold weather. I'm not judging it. I understand it. I hate the cold as well. But he is stuck in a division where at the end of the season, he's often in Buffalo or New England. He's in cold weather. I mean, he even, the schedule has always been even very unfair that he can end up in cold weather places that aren't even in division, right? It's just been a really bad string of luck. But this year, if you make it to the fantasy playoffs, Tua is literally set up to be a league winner. Week 16 and 17 in particular are the key here with Tua here, and why I am okay with drafting him as a QB2, because particularly in SuperFlex here, and in one QB, you don't need to draft him. You just need to let him sit on waivers, because nobody's going to draft him. You just let him sit on waivers, and then you pick him up at an appropriate time to hoard him for this playoff bonanza that you will get here. And in Superflex, you will have the ability to pick and choose which games you can play with him, and then hoard him until this moment where in week 16 and 17, he faces games in Miami. He doesn't have to go anywhere. Games in Miami against Cincinnati and Tampa Bay. That is literally the most ideal situation that you can ask for. Miami against terrible defenses in Cincinnati and Tampa Bay. I mean, my God. So yes, I am pro Tua in Superflex because of the fact that you don't have to draft him in an aggressive BDP. We're getting a significant discount. You're drafting him as a low-end QB2, a guy that you are going to wait significantly on, and you've already got your other QB2. Maybe you're picking up someone I like where you could pair him up, like maybe you're dipping and you've got your high-end quarterback that you get early on. Then you wait a little bit and you say, okay, I'm going to wait a little bit and let me draft a guy like Jordan Love, right? And Tua Tagovailoa. And I can flip back and forth between them as my QB2 as necessary, and then deploy Tua for the fantasy playoffs, and it will be perfection. Hear me out on that one. And then one more guy. No. I'm going to talk about two more guys here of quarterbacks that I am loving as QB2s. Bryce Young. I've made it very clear that despite my Clemson fandom here, I am team Bryce Young, and the training camp videos and news that are coming out, it's just injecting more Bryce Young positivity in my veins. My God. Again, we have to take training camp with a grain of salt because 9 out of 10 people at training camp are live and, they're biased. They've got, a very positive bias here. They want the best. And offensive plays do tend to be amplified if your team is playing against a legitimately bad defense. So it's not surprising that Carolina would be doing well. But he also did have good performances this week in this week, today in their 7-on-7s and whatnot against Cleveland. So things were good. Things are panning out here. We're feeling very positive about Bryce Young. And here's one of the good things that we love as well. Carolina might actually have one of the better offensive lines this season. And that was something that really played a big part in Carolina's success last year. They really invested into their offensive line. They got obviously a massive upgrade in play calling behind that improved offensive line. And it's not shocking that as Bryce Young got his second chance at a revival, we saw a much improved version of him. It makes logical sense. And now 2025 brings the one piece that we were missing here, a true wide receiver one, and Tera McMillan. He is him. He is the perfect big-bodied receiver, contested catch receiver that will be that dominant red zone target there for Bryce Young. So it's literally just a match made in heaven there. He's someone that I absolutely love targeting in late as your QB2 that you wait on, or even a QB3 if you want to go a little bit heavier there for sure. Then we got a guy like Michael Penix, who I do like as well. We need to be realistic here about Michael Penix. I think people like to throw around stats from the little sample size that we got last year. And I feel like we can't do that because those 3 games that he did play last year, those 3 full games were against the Giants, Washington, and Carolina. That's not a sample size. That's not a real sample size there. He's a pocket passer. He is mobile, but it's not someone that's going to add legitimate rushing upside. So good news, he's behind a fine offensive line, and he's in an excellent system with a full off season to be the QB1 with a wonderful bevy of weapons here. Atlanta's offense actually pushed a ton of pass volume last year. Surprisingly, you would think it, like if you were looking at the receivers and Drake London and Darnell Mooney, because Darnell Mooney actually got a lot of volume there. If you were looking at them, you would be able to figure it out. You add that to the volume that Bijan, and it makes sense overall. It was just that Kirk Cousins was so terrible and didn't really do anything with that volume. Atlanta had the 5th most passing yards last year, just over 4,000 yards. But they only had 21 passing touchdowns and 19 interceptions. They were just wildly inefficient through the air. It wasn't that they were aggressively tilted on the ground. They were tied for 9th with 2 teams for rushing touchdowns, and were only just 3 touchdowns away from the mean. So they really weren't like aggressively pushing that volume comparatively on the ground, or pushing touchdowns comparatively on the ground. It was literally just that Kirk Cousins was incredibly inefficient at converting and not having a ridiculous amount of turnovers, unfortunately, which made the volume wildly unusable from a fantasy perspective for him. Michael Penix has the opportunity to take that volume and just be efficient. And he can be a nice fantasy productive quarterback there. There's a lot of room for him to improve. Again, just for perspective, for a nice comparison here. When we're looking at volume here, the Bucs had just 200 more passing yards than the Falcons. Falcons had about 4,000. Bucs had about 4,200. The Bucs scored 502 points. Atlanta just had 389. The discrepancy was insane. You can use the Ravens as a comparison, roughly the same passing yards, 518 points. Again, Atlanta just had a severe efficiency problem. Michael Penix has the room to take that volume, increase the efficiency, and be a borderline QB1 there. So I do love him as somebody that we're drafting like right around QB 24 with legitimate borderline QB1 upside there. And then two more guys that we're going to talk about here positively. Geno Smith is another one that is intriguing here. He is the lowest ADP of guys that you realistically feel comfortable with. When you look at Geno's 2024, wasn't actually that bad. His interceptions were up, but other than that, all of his other statistics were fine. It's just that Seattle's offensive line was terrible last year. Struggled with inconsistency here. Geno didn't have a bad year from a fantasy perspective. He was the overall QB 13. He was QB 17 in average points per game. Again, like Jordan Love, it's more like QB 15 because of those two random starters. Oddly enough, one was Jimmy G. Because of those two random starters being put in there. But Geno was more QB 15 here, and we are getting a significant discount where he is being drafted as a high-end QB 3. That math doesn't add up there. He is someone who has that job secure. He's fallen into oddly enough, better situation, to be quite frank, not to down Seattle there, but just optimism that I have around Vegas. From a fantasy perspective, he's going into a good situation where he's got a nice variety of solid pass catchers, and he's going behind a good offensive line. The Raiders offensive line actually outperformed expectations last year. I think they should this year as well. But he's got Ashton Genty, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, Deontay Thornton, Brock Bowers, of course. And then we've got Jack Besh as well, who's just kind of buried there a little bit. But I mean, they're deep. That's how deep they are, that their second round pick doesn't actually have the opportunity to really push into the starting lineup there. Reports coming out of training camp are excellent. We're not hearing anything negative about Geno Smith. The young talent is really thriving and forming a good rapport here. We're getting a significant discount here, and someone that you can target as a really effective late round quarterback, particularly in SuperFlex. And then one more that we have to do here. I know you're not going to like it. I've talked about it before. I don't like it, but I've done it. So take your medicine, swallow it. At this point, the ADP for Anthony Richardson is just so stupid that why would you not? You take a stab at it. It's one of my favorite random stabs to just, hey, like, well, I think he will get the starting job. It's looking more than likely that I was skeptical for a while, especially with the injury that popped up, but he's looking healthy. He's looking like he's going to get the starting job. I have zero faith that he will retain that starting job, but that's fine because he has let's see, what is his ADP right here? I've got it pulled up. Let's see how quick my internet is. He has an ADP right now. Oh, that's an overshoot because of best ball. It's QB 26, but his rankings are more so around QB 29 here is more appropriate, coming in after guys like Cam Ward and Aaron Rodgers here. Just the upside. That's that's definitely more of the best ball drafts, trying to take that high upside pick of if he starts any number of games in best ball, it's going to be advantageous to you to snag him at the end of drafts. But from a fantasy perspective, from us in season-long redraft leagues that are SuperFlex here, this is a stab that if you can grab it, I would absolutely grab it here because the upside is exactly what it's always been. If he's on the field, he's got weekly top 5 upside. It's just a matter of how long he stays on the field, but the ADP is just so stupidly low that it's worth the chance there. If it doesn't work out, you can make it work there. It's a guy that you're drafting as your QB3, not even as your QB2. It's not a big deal here. I am going to touch quickly on, as we wrap things up, guys in this QB2 range that I'm fading, that I'm not leaning into, and I'm uncomfortable with in this range, unfortunately, comparatively to the guys that we talked about. CJ Stroud is someone that I will be avoiding, unfortunately. The offensive line was a major issue. If it doesn't improve, and I'm skeptical of that improvement, CJ Stroud will suffer again. The team will be fine. They're in a division where they'll probably win it. They'll probably be in the playoffs. Nico Collins will get volume, but as a quarterback that doesn't have that rushing upside, unfortunately, behind a bad offensive line with young developing weapons in the receiving core outside of Nico Collins, there's a lot that is going to be worked through here. We also have an unreliable run game as well. It feels like the Texans just could be a mess that does get by because they're an overall fine team. Their defense is solid, looking solid in training camp as well. But at the end of the day, I would 9 times out of 10 rather have a JJ McCarthy than a CJ Stroud. It's not a question for me at this point, unfortunately. Matt Stafford is another one here. And I got a mailbag question that I wanted to talk about from Fantasy Football Commish at Ask the FFC. Is Stafford's back issue a concern for Puka and Adams if he misses time, or is simply less than years past? His play or Jimmy G seems like a passing downgrade. Yeah, we got the news that Stafford got an epidural. I've had one of those twice to help him with the pain of his aggravated disc. Oddly enough, I think I have an aggravated disc too, but I don't have to play quarterback. The Rams have been very adamant that they are holding Matt Stafford due to a precaution with, the back injury, that he's going to be ready for week 1. I do trust Sean McVay. I don't trust a lot of coaches, but I do trust Sean McVay in terms of the words that actually come out of his mouth. I do think that Stafford will be ready. But the problem is that it's not a matter of whether or not Stafford starts in week 1. It's a matter of how long he can play with that back injury. Is it going to actually go away, or is this going to be something that he is dealing with the entire season? I worry about that. And if it is something that he is dealing with the entire season, that's a problem, particularly when they are down their most significant offensive lineman without a timeline to return. In Jackson, he's dealing with blood clots. This is a major concern, and it is a concern. I actually talked about this last week in particular with Puka Nacua. That is the one that I am significantly worried about. I'm not as much with Davante Adams, just because we don't have, his ADP is still, it's still a pretty ADP, but it's not typically what we've had to pay for Davante Adams, right? But with Puka Nacua, you're looking at a mid first round pick here for a guy whose quarterback situation could fluctuate throughout the year, which is the case for anybody, right? But we know that this is a potential problem heading into the season, and you have to be cautious of that when it is an issue heading into the season. Puka Nacua, when you combine the presence of Davante Adams with the fact that we have this insecurity with Matt Stafford's health, that is what makes me push him further back in the rankings, and not dramatically. I kind of wish I could push him back, but there's only so far that you can realistically push Puka Nacua back for me. But he's more of a late first round pick, and someone who, to be quite honest, around that area, I'm looking and I'm like, I could look in another direction, right? Because the situation feels a lot shakier than what people are kind of taking into account here. So yes, I am concerned, unfortunately, for Stafford, for Puka, and we're looking at somebody who the ADP for Stafford is fine, but when the ADP is sitting around those guys that I talked about previously, my problem is that I will take the younger quarterback who I know is healthy heading into the season over the quarterback who's older with a back injury. Yeah. Another quarterback let's talk about here is Sam Darnold. This one's pretty simple. It's yet another line issue. You see a pattern with me. If the offensive line is a problem, I'm a very simple person. I'm skeptical of pocket passers behind bad offensive lines. It has nothing to do with the quarterback. I like Sam Darnold. If he could stay upright and not be rushed, I'm into it. I like JSN. I would like Sam Darnold to JSN to be a fantastic connection here. But again, this is just kind of a shaky situation where we have to get a little bit concerned here. We also have to factor in that one, they're not tied to Sam Darnold long-term, technically. His contract, they can get out of it. They don't have to say, okay, we've got this guy next year. We just need to push through it, and we'll make it work, and we figure out the offensive line next year if that does continue to be an issue. They don't have to do that. They did draft Jalen Milroe. I'm not a big Jalen Milroe fan. There's development that has to happen there, but at the end of the day, if Seattle feels like Sam Darnold isn't functioning behind the offensive line, they can just move on to a guy that is an extremely mobile quarterback and that can deal with a bad offensive line. So just keep that in mind, that job security might not be as secure as it might seem. Cam Ward is another one that I am bypassing here. Again, simply speaking, I do like Calvin Ridley out of here. That is one of the very few pieces that I am super okay with on this team, unfortunately. Ward doesn't offer the significant rushing upside that we need in this range with this level of a bad team here. I think there are other higher upside routes that you can go. Aaron Rodgers is another one that I am avoiding in this area. I'm pro DK Metcalf, but again, because he will be hyper targeted, but Rodgers is a fantasy asset, not so much. Now, Pittsburgh is obviously an upgrade from New York, but again, there's not a lot of juice there, unfortunately. Last season, when we're looking at Aaron Rodgers, it took him until week 15 against Jacksonville to actually put up a top 5 fantasy performance. That's a problem. He has a cap ceiling. The majority of his performances will be in the QB 15 to 20 range. It's just not worth it. He's stable, but I want a little bit more in terms of where I'm looking at quarterbacks in this range. I want to shoot for the guys that actually have upside. Russ falls into the same category. Contrary to maybe popular belief, I do think that Russ is going to be the starter the majority of the year. This is not a job security issue. It's a severe ceiling issue. If you're looking for a guy to consistently finish as like QB 20, Russ is your guy. He's got a little juice left. And again, I do think he will have the job the majority of the season because I don't really see an entry point until you get to like week 11 for Jackson Dart because the schedule is just so nasty. Unfortunately here for him, Russ will just be in a position where it's going to be him and Malik Neighbors, force feeding the ball there because that is going to be the best and only route that he has to go here. Malik will get the volume, but Russ just is not going to have the high upside, particularly with the schedule that they have, unfortunately. Let's answer some mailbag questions, though, because we've got a couple more here. And we're going to talk receiver here from Commissioner Breeze, at McBreeze11 on Twitter. Your concern level for Chris Godwin missing week 1. My concern level is super high. Quite frankly, I have been planning for him to start the season on the PUP for a while. Before the Bucs even announced that he got the surgery, their wording was very suspicious. They were saying some things that didn't make a lot of sense. Like, oh, we feel like we can just, we don't have to push Chris Godwin. We don't have to, rush him back because we just feel so confident in the receiving core that we have. And Emeka is so fantastic and whatnot. And it made you go, huh, okay. You don't feel like you need to push him. Interesting. These were things that they were saying before they announced they got the second surgery. And then it was kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Cool. Thank you for the notice there. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to start the season healthy. I think he's going to start on the PUP. I'm very, very big on Mike Evans. And I have been drafting in Emeka Egbuka. I don't feel positively about Chris Godwin, unfortunately. And you hate it because Chris Godwin is such an excellent receiver. So I hate to fade him by any means. And I hate to fade people at all, especially when you're getting a nice discount on Chris Godwin in terms of ADP. But the problem is that we're now talking about a player that will not have had any offseason preparation, that will start the week off on the PUP and is, what is he, 29. So he's not, cliff age, but he is, elderish receiver, starting off with no true entry point there. I don't feel super good about it. I do think that they might ease him along, not somebody that I want to be targeting. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. But yes, very big pro Mike Evans. Love. And then drafting a good amount of Emeka. Brian Burke also gave us a nice question here at the Brian Burke on Twitter. So the question was, several of our fave fantasy analysts seem to be all in on George Pickens in Dallas this year. However, Brian Schottenheimer's success in the league has been somewhat middling and very run heavy, run first. Is there enough for CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson to flourish? So you're 100% right that Schottenheimer is not mincing words, that he wants to be run heavy. The caveat I give is that, what you want and what you can do are two very different things. You want to be run heavy. You don't have the personnel to do it. You don't. Who on that offense can you really feel we would need a dramatic turn around for Javonte Williams in terms of health? It's possible. I've talked about it before. This is not negative to Javonte, right? Because at least I can make the excuse of maybe it took him just an extra year to recover from his injury, right? To get right and feel like himself. And he claims he feels more like himself and back to what he originally was. So take that for what it's worth. But that's what it would take, right, for him to be run heavy, because I don't see a scenario where Miles Sanders can lead a run heavy offense. I don't see a scenario where Jaden Blue has turned things around in training camp, to his credit. But at the end of the day, that's not someone that we're looking at as a 3-down back. He would be, a supplemental explosive back, that can bring big plays and whatnot, have impact that way. Nice change of pace. But I don't see them plugging away with him downhill 3 downs. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Phil Maffa is the only physical fit for a run-heavy offense. But again, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think he wants to do that. I don't know that he can. I think he will reach the point that happened with Mike McCarthy, where his vision of what he wanted to do would have to be adjusted at some point during the season. And he would do it, right? Because what you want to do and what you're able to do with the personnel that you have, thanks to Jerry Jones, those are two different things. So when I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson, I think there will be a good amount of pass volume. We do need Dak to get back to where Dak was, because he can push the volume. We need him to get back to where he was. So I do feel like people might be just a wee bit aggressive on Pickens, because on a week-to-week basis in terms of consistency, I don't know if it'll be as consistent as we want it to be. It's as if it's being looked at in terms of like draft-wise. I feel like it's being looked at as Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, or like mildly below that. And I feel like that's massively overselling it. It can be a lower budget version of that, but not the exact same thing. That said, I do think that George Pickens will be able to thrive in this offense, based off of having potential significant touchdown equity. I think this could be the year where he really just thrives from a red zone and big play perspective here, because he's got a quarterback that can actually deliver that. And he does fit perfectly against CeeDee Lamb. They play perfectly off of each other in terms of their roles. And I think it's a true match made in heaven. So I am mildly passionate about it in terms of, I think this was the one thing that Jerry did correctly, which tells me that it might not have been Jerry's idea. But this was the one move that I liked, that I was like, man, well, actually, let me not be rude. I did like Dallas's draft strategy. I did. So let me not be rude there. But in terms of free agency, this was a fantastic move for them. I think what we're going to see from him is that CeeDee Lamb will be fine, still the volume guy, still lots of yardage, right? And still touchdown opportunities. But for Pickens, I don't think that yardage will be consistent. I think he will have a higher touchdown ceiling kind of dependent person, where there will be games where it's like 3 catches for 50 yards, and then it'll be 5 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, it'll be nice, big, explosive games that'll be super fun. So I like George Pickens. I feel like the ADP is mildly aggressive, but I'm okay. I can work with that. So I'm okay with it. It wants to be a run-heavy offense, but I think he's going to realize quickly that it can't be. I appreciate his vocal. He's been very vocal about it in a fun way. I like him. I like the enthusiasm that he is bringing to the Cowboys. He's been very vocal about what he wants to do. But I think he will learn that he has to be very fluid very quickly. So that is it right there. But that wraps things up for us. I appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you for the awesome questions. Thank you for the mailbag questions, and thank you for the live questions as well. Again, if you want to submit any questions, just hit me up on any social media. If you're not following me, a follow would be awesome. You can find me at It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much everywhere. You can ask me questions. We can get them on here, or you can just ask me a general question if you just need an answer. I got you covered. Just tag me. As a reminder, please make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast. That would be wonderful. The Dear Miss Fantasy podcast on all platforms if you are not already subscribed, and make sure that you are also subscribed to Player Profiler. Other than that, that wraps things up. I appreciate you all tuning in here. I hope that you all have an amazing week. And I hope that you all, I hope that you all tune into all the preseason games, because we are blessed. It's going to be fun. We're getting, I wanted to talk about it, but for podcast people, I didn't want to say a whole bunch of stuff that would be irrelevant post the preseason games here. But we're getting Shadur Sanders starting, so we'll know real quick what to expect there. Somebody else announced that we were going to have starters. So we're going to have actual starters this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, like, oh my God. Football's back, people. Get pumped. And we'll do more stuff, because I know that next week you guys will be cramming for drafts here. So ask any questions away. I appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you so much. And I will see you again next week. Bye, guys.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.